The billionaire faked a power outage to trap the cleaner alone with his safe, but she did the unthinkable. Welcome back to our channel. Before we dive into today's incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest content. And we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell us where in the world you're listening to this story from. Your support means everything to us. Now, let's begin this thrilling tale of deception, integrity, and unexpected courage that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about human nature. Richard Blackwood stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, watching the city's lights twinkle 40 stories below. At 52, he had built an empire worth $12 billion, but tonight his focus wasn't on stock portfolios or corporate acquisitions. Tonight was about trust, or rather the complete absence of it. The billionaire had learned long ago that everyone had a price, and he made it his business to discover exactly what that price was for each person who entered his carefully controlled world. His staff of 12 had been meticulously vetted, background checked, and psychologically profiled, but Richard believed that true character could only be revealed under pressure. That's why he had devised what he called loyalty tests, elaborate scenarios designed to expose the greed he was certain lurked beneath every polite smile and deferential nod. The chef had failed spectacularly 6 months ago, when Richard left a briefcase containing $50,000 in cash accidentally in the kitchen. The man had photographed every bill before reporting the find, clearly planning to skim some for himself. He was terminated within the hour. The head gardener had lasted only 3 weeks after Richard discovered him taking expensive equipment home, piece by piece. Even his previous personal assistant had fallen when she couldn't resist accessing confidential files left deliberately unprotected on his desk. But tonight's test would be his masterpiece. Maria Santos, the cleaning woman, had been working in his penthouse for exactly 1 year. At 28, she was quiet, efficient, and seemingly invisible as she moved through his home each evening. She arrived promptly at 8 p.m. when Richard was usually at dinner meetings, and she was gone by midnight, leaving his penthouse spotless. He knew almost nothing about her personal life, which made her perfect for his experiment. Richard had spent weeks planning every detail. The security system would be programmed to simulate a power failure at exactly 9:30 p.m., when Maria would be cleaning his study. The emergency lighting would fail to activate in that specific room, leaving her alone in the darkness with his most prized possession, the titanium vault built into his office wall. But here was the twist that made Richard's lips curl into a satisfied smile. The vault would be standing wide open, its contents fully visible. Inside, $5 million in cash sat in neat stacks alongside rare diamonds and gold bars worth millions more. It was an impossible temptation, carefully orchestrated to reveal Maria's true nature. Richard had positioned micro-cameras throughout the study, each equipped with night vision capabilities. He would watch every moment from his private monitoring room, documenting her inevitable betrayal. His lawyers were already prepared to prosecute her to the fullest extent of the law, turning her into an example for anyone else who might consider crossing him. The beauty of the plan lay in its psychological precision. Maria would believe she was completely alone, that the power outage was genuine, and that no one could possibly know what she did in those precious minutes of darkness. She would have every opportunity to take what she wanted, to change her life forever with a crime that seemed perfectly undetectable. Richard checked his watch. 8:45 p.m. Maria had been in the building for 15 minutes, working her way through the lower floors of the duplex penthouse. Soon she would reach the study, and soon he would have definitive proof that beneath her humble exterior lurked the same corruption that infected everyone else in his orbit. Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway toward Mr. Blackwood's study, her mind focused on the evening's tasks ahead. She had developed a precise routine over the past year, moving efficiently through each room with the quiet professionalism that had earned her this prestigious position. Working for Richard Blackwood was the best job she'd ever had, paying more in a month than she used to make in 6 at her previous cleaning positions. The money allowed her to support her elderly mother in Queens and still save for the nursing degree she was pursuing at night school 3 days a week. As she approached the heavy oak doors of the study, Maria noticed something unusual. The door was slightly ajar, and she could see the distinctive blue glow of the vault's security panel through the gap. In all her months of working here, she had never seen the vault anything but securely closed, its brushed titanium surface reflecting the warm light of the study's antique lamps. She hesitated, her hand on the door handle. Mr. Blackwood was supposed to be at his weekly dinner with the mayor and city council members, a gathering that never ended before 11 p.m. The entire penthouse should be empty, except for her. Perhaps he had returned early and simply forgotten to close the vault before leaving again. Maria knocked gently on the doorframe and called out, "Mr. Blackwood, are you here?" When no response came, she pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The sight that greeted her made her breath catch in her throat. The massive vault, which she had always assumed contained important documents and maybe some family heirlooms, was standing completely open. Inside, neat stacks of $100 bills rose like small skyscrapers, their green surfaces catching the light. Beside them, velvet-lined cases displayed diamonds that sparkled like captured stars, and gold bars gleamed with an almost hypnotic warmth. Maria's first instinct was to immediately leave the room and call building security, but something made her pause. The arrangement seemed too perfect, too deliberately displayed. In her experience, wealthy people were paranoid about their valuables. They didn't leave bank-sized fortunes casually exposed. She was still processing this strange situation when the lights went out, not just dimmed or flickered, but completely disappeared, plunging the study into absolute darkness. The gentle hum of the air conditioning stopped, the soft blue glow of the vault's panel vanished, and even the distant city lights beyond the windows seemed somehow dimmer. Maria felt her way carefully toward the wall, searching for a light switch, but nothing responded to her touch. The power outage appeared to be complete. In the absolute silence that followed, she could hear her own heartbeat and the barely audible sound of her breathing. The emergency lighting that should have activated within seconds remained dark. She was alone in a billionaire's study with an open vault, containing more money than she could count, and no one would know what happened in this room until the power returned. Maria stood perfectly still in the darkness, her mind racing through the implications of this moment. She thought about her mother's medical bills, about the student loans that would take decades to repay, about the cramped apartment they shared with its leaking ceiling and broken heating. She thought about how different her life could be if she simply reached out and took what was right in front of her. Just a few stacks of bills from that vast fortune would change everything, and who could possibly know? But even as these thoughts crossed her mind, Maria felt something else rising within her, a deep, unshakable certainty about who she was and what she stood for. Her mother had raised her with values that weren't for sale, no matter the price. The darkness that surrounded her wasn't just an absence of light, it was a test of her character, and she would not be found wanting. In his monitoring room 3 floors below, Richard Blackwood leaned forward in his chair, his eyes fixed on the multiple night vision screens displaying every angle of his study. The infrared cameras clearly showed Maria's silhouette, standing motionless in the center of the room, just feet away from the open vault. He could see her turn her head toward the treasure, see her take a small step closer, and then stop again. "Come on," he whispered to himself, his fingers drumming impatiently on the desk. "Take the bait." But Maria didn't move toward the vault. Instead, she did something that made Richard's confidence falter for the first time in months. She pulled out her cell phone and activated its flashlight, casting a bright beam across the room. With careful, deliberate steps, she walked to the vault and began examining its interior, not to take anything, but to ensure everything was secure. Richard watched in growing bewilderment as Maria counted the stacks of money, not to calculate their value for theft, but to memorize their exact positions. She photographed the contents with her phone's camera, creating a detailed record of what was supposed to be there. Then, to his absolute amazement, she began looking for a way to close the vault. She spent nearly 10 minutes studying the locking mechanism by the light of her phone, clearly trying to figure out how to secure the treasure that had been left so carelessly exposed. When she couldn't immediately determine how to operate the sophisticated closing system, Maria made another choice that left Richard speechless. She positioned her cleaning cart directly in front of the vault opening, creating a physical barrier between the fortune and the rest of the room. Then she sat down on the floor in front of her makeshift barrier and began making phone calls. Richard activated the audio surveillance system and listened as she first called building security to report the power outage and request immediate assistance. Her voice was calm and professional, as she explained that she was concerned about the security implications of the electrical failure. Next, she called what appeared to be her mother, speaking in rapid Spanish to explain that she would be late coming home because of an emergency at work. Richard's Spanish was limited, but he caught enough to understand that she was being careful not to mention the specific nature of the emergency, protecting his privacy even in this moment of crisis. The third call was the one that truly shattered Richard's expectations. Maria called the emergency contact number she had been given during her hiring process, reaching his head of security at home. "Mr. Patterson, this is Maria Santos, Mr. Blackwood's cleaning woman. I'm sorry to disturb you at home, but there's been a power failure in the penthouse, and I've discovered that Mr. Blackwood's vault is standing open. I need someone to come immediately to secure it. I'm currently guarding it myself, but this situation requires proper authority." Richard heard the surprise in Patterson's voice as he promised to send a team within 15 minutes. As Maria ended the call, she settled more comfortably on the floor, clearly prepared to maintain her vigil until help arrived. She didn't touch her phone again, didn't take any photos of the treasure for herself, didn't even appear tempted to look more closely at the fortune she was protecting. Instead, she began humming softly to herself in the darkness, a gentle melody that somehow made the vast, cold study feel warmer. Richard stared at the monitors, his carefully constructed worldview cracking like glass. This wasn't how his test was supposed to go. Maria wasn't supposed to protect his wealth. She was supposed to steal it. She wasn't supposed to call for help. She was supposed to help herself. And she certainly wasn't supposed to sit there humming as if guarding a billionaire's fortune was just another part of her job. For the first time in his adult life, Richard Blackwood had encountered someone who couldn't be bought, manipulated, or corrupted, and he had no idea what to do with that discovery. 20 minutes later, the study door burst open as Patterson and 2 security guards rushed in with high-powered flashlights. Followed closely by an electrician, they found Maria exactly where she had positioned herself, sitting calmly in front of the vault with her cleaning cart, serving as a protective barrier. "Thank you for calling this in, Maria," Patterson said, clearly impressed by her quick thinking. "We'll take it from here." As the security team worked to secure the vault and the electrician investigated the power failure, Maria gathered her cleaning supplies and prepared to leave. It was then that Richard made a decision that surprised even himself. He left his monitoring room and took the elevator up to the study, arriving just as the emergency lighting flickered back to life. "Mr. Blackwood," Patterson turned in surprise. "I thought you were at the mayor's dinner." "I came back early," Richard said smoothly, his eyes finding Maria across the room. She was standing quietly by the door, waiting for permission to continue her work or leave, whichever was preferred. "I heard about the power situation. Is everything secure?" "Thanks to Maria here, yes, sir," Patterson replied. "She discovered the vault had been left open and immediately took steps to protect it. Called us right away and stood guard until we arrived. Exemplary behavior." Richard studied Maria's face in the restored light. She looked tired but alert, professional but not subservient. There was something in her eyes, not fear of being caught in some wrongdoing, but rather a quiet confidence that came from knowing she had done the right thing. "Maria," Richard said, stepping closer. "Could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Patterson and the other men filed out, closing the door behind them. The vault was now securely locked, its contents safe from the world once again. In the restored lighting, the study looked exactly as it always had, as if the last hour had been nothing more than a strange dream. "You must have been frightened," Richard began, "alone in the dark with the power out." Maria shook her head slightly. "I was concerned about the security of your belongings, answer, but not frightened. Even with the vault standing open like that, all that money and those valuables exposed, especially because of that," Maria replied quietly. "It was clearly a serious security breach. I couldn't just leave it unprotected." Richard found himself studying this woman as if seeing her for the first time. In all his months of observing her work, he had never really looked at her, not as a person anyway. She was just another employee, another potential threat to be monitored and tested. But now he saw the strength in her posture, the intelligence in her eyes, the unshakable integrity that had just cost him everything he thought he knew about human nature. "You could have taken some of that money," he said, the words coming out before he could stop them. "No one would have known. The power was out, the cameras weren't working. You were completely alone." Maria looked at him with something that might have been pity. "I would have known, Mr. Blackwood, and more importantly, it wouldn't have been mine to take." The simplicity of her response hit Richard like a physical blow, not, "I was afraid of getting caught," or "I didn't want to lose my job," but simply, "It wouldn't have been mine to take." As if the concept of theft was so foreign to her nature that it never seriously entered her mind. "Why do you work here, Maria?" he asked suddenly. "But I mean, what do you need the money for?" "My mother has diabetes and heart problems. The medications are expensive, and she needs good health care. I'm also studying nursing at night school. This job pays well enough that I can take care of her and still work toward a better future." "And you're content with that, working as a cleaner while you study?" Maria's expression softened slightly. "There's dignity in all honest work, Mr. Blackwood. I take pride in doing my job well, whatever that job might be." Richard felt something shifting inside his chest, an unfamiliar sensation that took him a moment to recognize as shame. Here was a woman working multiple jobs to care for her family and better herself, and he had tried to trap her into committing a crime just to satisfy his own cynical assumptions about human nature. The next morning, Richard Blackwood sat in his office reviewing the security footage from the previous night. He had watched it 3 times already, each viewing revealing new details about Maria's character that he had missed before. The way she had carefully documented the vault's contents to protect him from potential insurance disputes, the way she had positioned herself as a human shield between the treasure and any potential threats, the way she had hummed that gentle melody, turning a moment of crisis into something almost peaceful. When his assistant announced that Maria had arrived for their requested meeting, Richard felt nervous in a way he hadn't experienced since his first board presentation 30 years ago. He had spent the entire sleepless night trying to decide what to say to her, how to explain what he had done without revealing the full extent of his manipulation. Maria entered his office wearing the same quiet professionalism she always displayed, but Richard thought he detected a slight wariness in her manner. Perhaps she had sensed that something about the previous night wasn't quite what it had seemed. "Please, sit down," Richard said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "I wanted to thank you personally for your actions last night. Your quick thinking and integrity saved me from what could have been a significant loss." "I was just doing my job, sir," Maria replied simply. "Actually, you went far beyond your job description," Richard said. "And that's why I've made a decision that I hope you'll find acceptable." He opened his desk drawer and withdrew a thick folder. "I'm offering you a position as my personal assistant. The salary would be 3 times what you're currently earning, with full health benefits for you and your mother, and flexible scheduling so you can continue your nursing studies." Maria's eyes widened slightly, but she remained composed. "That's a very generous offer, Mr. Blackwood. May I ask what brought this on?" Richard had prepared several responses to this question, ranging from casual to professional to completely dishonest, but looking at Maria's direct gaze, he found himself telling the truth. "Because last night I learned something about you that I thought was impossible to find in this world," he said quietly. "I learned that you can't be bought, and I learned that your integrity isn't situational. Those are qualities I've been looking for my entire career, and I was beginning to believe they didn't exist." Maria was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with those intelligent eyes. When she spoke, her voice was carefully measured. "Mr. Blackwood, I have a feeling that last night's power outage wasn't quite the accident it appeared to be." Richard felt his carefully prepared explanations crumble. There was no point in lying to someone who had already demonstrated such clear perception. "You're right," he admitted. "It was a test that I'm deeply ashamed of now. To see if I would steal from you." "Yes." Maria nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she had already suspected. "And now that I passed your test, you want to reward me." "It's not a reward," Richard said urgently. "It's recognition of who you are." Maria, in 40 years of business, dealing with politicians, executives, lawyers, investors, people with the finest educations and highest social standing. I have never met anyone with your level of fundamental integrity. That's not something you learn in school or inherit from your family's wealth. That's something that comes from your core. Maria stood up, smoothing her uniform skirt with careful hands. Mr. Blackwood, I appreciate the offer, but I need to decline. Richard felt something like panic rise in his chest. The salary isn't enough. We can negotiate. The salary is more than generous, Maria interrupted gently, but I can't work for someone who doesn't trust the people around him enough to treat them with basic respect. The words hit Richard like a slap. What do you mean? You didn't just test me last night. You tried to entrap me. You put me in a position where you hoped I would fail, where you could confirm your worst assumptions about human nature. That's not the foundation for any relationship I want to be part of. Richard opened his mouth to protest, to explain that his motivations were more complex than that. But Maria wasn't finished. I've worked for you for over a year. In that time, I've been punctual, thorough, and honest. I've never given you any reason to doubt my character, but instead of taking that as evidence of who I am, you chose to create an elaborate scheme to try to prove that I'm actually a thief. The truth of her words settled over Richard like a weight. She was absolutely right, and they both knew it. However, Maria continued, I do have a counter-proposal. Richard looked up hopefully. I'll stay in my current position, but I want you to establish an educational scholarship fund for the children of your service staff, housekeepers, security guards, maintenance workers, the people you depend on but apparently don't trust. Fund their college educations, their nursing programs, their trade schools. Show them the same faith you should have shown me. Richard stared at her in amazement. Even in her moment of moral victory, she was thinking about others, using her leverage not for personal gain, but to help people she had probably never even met. How much? He asked quietly. $500,000 to start, administered by an independent board so it can't be used as another manipulation tool. Done, Richard said immediately. And Maria, you're right about everything you said. I've spent so long assuming the worst about people that I forgot how to see the best. Thank you for reminding me. Maria moved toward the door, then paused. Mr. Blackwood, the next time you want to test someone's character, try trusting them first. You might be surprised by what you discover. After she left, Richard sat alone in his office for a long time, staring out at the city beyond his windows. For the first time in decades, he began to wonder not about what people might take from him, but about what he might learn from them. And he realized that Maria Santos, his cleaning woman who refused to be anything more, had just taught him the most valuable lesson of his entire life. That true wealth isn't measured in what you can hoard, but in what you're willing to trust others with. The end.